I got stung by a wasp on Sunday.
That is the worst. Where did it sting you?
It stung me right here on this arm. I can't get my hoodie all the way up to show it, but it's like it is still there, like in a way where it's like raised and a little bit swollen. Like when I got stung, like we were discussing what does the wasp sensation feel like. It's like a bite with electricity is like kind of where we ended it at, because it's not just like the bite and then it's gone. It's just like simmering or something there. But yeah, I was just outside grabbing a chair, and like just out of nowhere, I didn't even know there were wasps out there. Didn't see it, and it just like out of nowhere, and it was painful.
Wow. Yeah, that stinks. I think I have a phobia of things with stingers because when I was, 2 or 3, my sister, who is 3 years older, had convinced me that would be a good idea to launch a rock at the nest of yellow jackets that was burrowed into the rock bed in their parents' garden. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get it there. Like excited to land it on there, not knowing what things with stingers did. And then I was like,
yellow jackets are aggressive.
Yeah, and they don't lose their stinger.
Yeah,
like
they
a
keep
bumblebee
going.
might or whatever.
Yeah, they don't stop stinging. How many times did you get stung then?
Oh, a ton, like all up and down my whole arm, and I just was like running down the yard.
And your sister
screaming.
did this to you.
Yeah.
And where was she? Was she around? Or did she like go inside before you threw the rock, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. She must have backed away enough, like, because we were standing right by each other, like, hey, James, you should throw the rock, and I don't recall that, but I think she might have like receded up to the porch as I got ready to throw it, and I started screaming when they came to me and running, made it obvious who the threat was. Whereas it probably would have been better to like walk slowly and make no noise, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. After I got stung, as one does, I went down the rabbit hole of like, what exactly was it that stung me? What could I have done that would have made that thing not happen to me? And I was reading the difference between like paper wasps, yellow jackets, and like paper wasps, you're supposed to just run because they're not going to follow you too far. That's
okay.
But yellow jackets, it's meant that you're supposed to just like, because they just follow it. They're highly aggressive. Like yellow jackets are known to just sting for fun.
Oh wow!
Like that they're that aggressive of a
so
species.
If they're angry, they're really going to go after it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like throwing a rock at their nest. But so I went in, and it was just I just wanted retribution. Like, look at my arm; it's all swollen, and it still hurts. So Danielle left to go to her book club, and I was like, Peter, we're going to go buy some wasp spray. He was doing some sort of activity, so he was really upset. He didn't want to go. He's like, I don't want to do it now. I don't want you to do it. You'll get stung again. Like, he was really worried that I was going to get stung again if I tried to take out these wasps. I told him, I won't get stung. It'll be okay. And so we went and bought it, came back, and I knew where, like, it was right above me where the hornet's nest was on our back porch. And I was fixing to go out there. And Peter goes, Daddy, what about the other none? What about the other nest? I was like, it's just that one, buddy. And he's like, no, there's another one right above our door. My 4-year-old tells me this, and I was like, what? So I like slide it out, like poke my head out, and there's like 30 of them, like right above. I close it.
Did you go get some Raid from the store?
Yeah, some Raid with like the 20-foot shot radius. So step one, right? I like crack the door. And I'm aiming at it, and so then and it gets there, and I have pretty good aim, so it was direct hit. And they went down, and man, they like the nests aren't that large, but there's a lot of them in there.
There are a lot in there. I was doing this the other day too. It's crazy.
And so they all fall out, and I'm like, all right, the easy one that I can shoot at from inside is done. The next one was a little bit more scary, right? So I made sure I like brought a broom out there and like swerved my way across quickly, try to get as far away as possible.
What was the broom for?
The broom, so I could swing at him. if there was an issue, I played baseball. It would hurt. They wouldn't like it. So just in case, because I like couldn't go anywhere. Like if they were able to somehow trace it back to me, like I couldn't run back inside
Right.
because that's where the nest was, and I was for sure going to get.
Yeah, so you're
gonna
gonna
get
spray
hit.
and then like
So
go around the other way. Or
yeah, something like that. It probably would have been a better idea to like spray and then just like get going, but I wanted to watch them die.
Revenge.
They
Warning to all the wasps out there.
Yeah,
Stay away from Jayce Palmer.
No, it was funny. So sprayed it, and then they did come after me again a little bit. I didn't get stung again. I did use my broom, but Danielle was like watching it all happen.
Yeah.
From inside. That evening, because she'd come back, because you're supposed to wait until like right before the sun goes down. That's when they're the most docile.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Right. These are the things that you learn when you read
do a lot
about
of
wasps
research.
for about an hour.
I was just really hoping you had to use the broom, and Danielle had a video of you using the broom.
That did not exist. But as I came back in, she was like, graceful, nice, like, because I'm just like going
funny.
all over the place. But the wasps are gone. My backyard is safe again. So yeah, I'm not a fan. What was something else interesting that I learned about them? Well, there's like the difference, like some of them, certain wasps have like, they're up in your porches and they try to be pretty out in the open. There's others that are like, try to be more like, you can't really see them. They're secretive.
Yeah.
And there's
like
ones
a little...
that the ground ones,
Mhm.
like the hornets or the yellow jackets you were talking about. And those are the really scary ones. Those are the ones you don't want to mess with. But Peter was very happy. He was like, "Good job, Dad." And I was like, "No problem, man. Just risking life and limb, me against these wasps."
That's awesome.
Which was pretty fun. I was talking to our old long lost friend, Chris Beck, last night
From P-Town.
from P-Town, who, if you haven't figured it out yet, Chris had to take a step back just with being the dad and figuring it all out, and him being farther away had to take a step back from the podcast. But I was talking to him about being a guest on the podcast now, and
What did he say?
he just laughed at it. He was like, "Yeah, at this point, it's been over a year since I've been in there," which made sense. But we rediscovered Chris would. I'm talking about this now because Chris would be upset if I didn't. But I haven't picked up a video game in a while, like especially like an online video game. And then Chris, while I was coming home from spending time with a friend, he texted me and was like, "Hey, Rocket League, the game from our college days, is cross-platform now, because Chris is an Xbox guy and I have a PlayStation. So we should play together. And I have a mic, so you need to go buy a mic, and we're gonna play Rocket League tonight." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good." So I went and bought one of those like dorky little gamer mics or whatever to put on the deal and hang out with Chris, and it was a blast, and it was worth every penny, and we just like hung out, so it was fun.
That's so cool.
But he's doing really well. So James, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about achieving a goal, achieving our vision, and I'm just excited to share. Jason and I were actually just kind of brainstorming, looking at our lists and also looking at some books on the bookshelf. And Jace was like, "Hey, have you talked about 12-week year on here? Like, you share that with everyone." I was like, "No, but that'd be pretty fun."
Right.
So excited about it. 12-week year is a book written by a couple guys in the business world. And what I've found is, whether it's a business goal, a personal goal, like a goal on mission, it's probably, in my opinion, and I kind of voraciously read business books, it's probably one of the best books in that sector on goal setting and on like the excellence around achieving a goal. Like, the whole book contains not only how to look at this with a slightly different paradigm, but also kind of a system of living. So some of the best practices of how you might, be excellent in what you're committed to are really anchored in the book too. So it's both it's a different paradigm, how to go about crafting a tactical plan around your goal, and then kind of an operating system, if you will, of achieving those things.
And to put this into perspective, when James says that he voraciously reads business books, for the entirety that I've gotten to know James and become best friends with him, I'm not sure if there's a time where he isn't like preaching the gospel of whatever business book he read last overall. It's absolutely wild. Like, I remember, when we read Atomic Habits, we were all about that. When it was 12-week year, and then it was the the 4-hour work week and all
And I don't
these
know that I've
different
shared
things.
the 4-hour work week that much, but the thing to that point, like the thing that I like about, I've kind of found, and I probably share this one more than others, is that if someone's not big on reading this category of book, if you will, like some of the best things are in here. So like you could
Mhm.
read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and you're going to find the parts with regard to goal setting that are needed and like having a vision. You're going to find them in this book. You know, you could read another book.
Yeah, they all
And
piggyback off of each
yeah, and
other.
so this one's just really well designed in an action-oriented way that you could kind of take the playbook and it's applying to your vision and your life and your goals. So it's a nice manual. I've probably read it 5 times at least.
Yeah. And if anybody's like wondering, why are we looking at this book, in particular, or something like that? Whenever James was first really excited about the 12-week year, I'll be really completely honest with you. I was like, come on, it's just work a little faster, work 12 times as fast, or whatever the tagline is. I understood the basic concepts of like, if you make your deadlines closer, you will act like your deadlines are closer, and it will generate, you'll have greater motivation to accomplish your tasks quicker, and you'll get, like what the tagline is, what does it say? Get more done in 12 weeks than you do in 12 months. So whenever you're first talking to me about it, I was trying to be excited with you because I know that you have good stuff. But I was like, oh, it's just another, okay.
And honestly, that was kind of a friend of mine who's in the insurance business. They had some and gave them away, like when I was at the office, and I had kind of that first impression too, like, okay, this seems like one of the same books that one of a recycling of some of the same stuff, and seems to be overpromising
Right.
what it can deliver. But I think as a point of distinction, like yes, that is their tagline, even like get more done in 12 weeks than others do in 12 months. But the reality is, it's not like we're not doing this to like cram extra activity into our lives per se. We're trying to be very intentional about how we're achieving a lesser amount of things actually. And so it kind of starts with a paradigm shift. And the reality is, most of us like think about annual goals, like New Year's comes up, or New Year's Eve, or your birthday, or Lent, or the quarter, or the new fiscal year. And there's this trigger to think about, okay, what do I want to accomplish in this next season?
Sure.
Well, I don't know if anyone else is like that, but the amount of times I've like thought, yeah, I'm going to get in better shape this year, or do this by the end of this year. And then come December or October, and like now I'm thinking about doing it because I made that goal. I basically wasted the whole 3/4 of the year on saying I was going to do that, but not actually doing anything about it. So I kind of put it off. So the timetable was much too long, but also there was nothing specific around how I'm going to get in better shape. So the thing that I really love about the book is this realization that we do need actually a long horizon. Like we actually need longer than a year, because some of the most life-changing things are a progression of a mountain climb over 3, 5, 7 years. And they actually start that way, like kind of beginning with why. They have you write this aspirational vision.
Yeah.
Because anytime you're taking on something very important, there's going to be resistance and uncomfort, and you really need to have a sense of where you're going. In this case, since we're Catholics, and maybe there's some mission tied up in our goal and the charisms that God's given me, like there's actually the reality that I'm a son entrusted with this gift of a life He gave me.
Yeah.
And so there's a great vision I'm working through.
Yeah.
So,
Parable of the talents.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
right there.
And so you spend some good time on this vision as you work through it. And then what you're doing, as you might think like you would in annual planning, like what are the kinds of things that I want to work on, or what's the goal that I have in mind? But then you hone in on just a few things. 3 is better than 10, 1's better than 3. Like one goal, maybe 2 goals, maybe 3 goals max. And you have kind of an intentional imbalance. And you work through, once you have that goal, you really do the hard work up front of flushing out that goal. So instead of spending weeks kind of chipping away at it, working through it without definition, you actually, like in 1 week, they call it the 13th week, in 1 week when you're not in this an acting on a tactical plan, you actually start to chart out your course, and you realize, well, I only have 12 weeks, so I can't do everything that one might possibly want to do to lose that weight or achieve the sales goal or start this thing at the parish. So I'm going to have to be discerning in the things that are actually more likely to be fruitful, or the things that better fit my current state or the people around me. So it kind of forces some decision. But then you mentioned something, since the time horizon is shorter, you do feel week over week, because you are measuring and you've intentionally thought through this, you do feel the little bit of a push that you need to take action on something. Whereas in the past, it would be a lot easier to say, well, I've got time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just being a good steward of your time by saying, it's actually possible for me to start this initiative within 12 weeks if I make a decision to do it,
Sure.
And that might mean I'm deciding not to do other things, but it's actually possible. And so it's taken from the idea of periodization, actually. So like,
what's the word?
Periodization. And so like a bicyclist, for example, let's say he's training for Tour de France, or a marathon runner, like they're going to have a period between their races that they're training for. They might have this long-term goal of being in like the Boston Marathon, the runner, but there's a benchmark way before that Boston Marathon. And so his annual goal isn't to get in it isn't just getting in that marathon. There's something much before that, a time trial, a specific race he's running mm-hmm. that's time bound and soon. And so he's able to give an intentional imbalance to that thing, as opposed to try and work on. So in that thing, he might be working on his time trial, as opposed to trying to work on distance and time, So
get more specific. Yeah. And it's like, it's a human formation.
It really is.
We're discussing here. And, we're a podcast about discipleship, and like discipleship is with humans. Mm-hmm. And there's just certain things that humans are just pretty naturally bad at. And one of those things is like procrastination, planning, and different things like that. And so I think that like framing this model for that, I'm just excited that we're like going into these parts of it, because I think these are the neglected parts a lot mm-hmm. of the time when it comes to like a church thing. Like it would be great if a pastor like gave a homily about this, like at the homily of the talents, or that's on the gospel reading of the talents. Like this would be really, really great formation for a parish, or
sitting with your team or your staff and kind of doing it together mm-hmm. would be really neat. A couple of things I want to share that were some high points to me as I went through this. One of them is that we're actually going to throw out the annual plan. Like we're going to throw it out. And the reason why I say that is...
It's dead.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is like, we're going to be really clear about what we want over a long horizon. And we're going to be kind of aggressive with what that big vision is. Like we're going to have great expectations for what God can bring about in our lives. But I can't affect something 11 months from now. Like I can't affect change on that very well. And frankly, if I live the next 12 weeks very intentional, I'm going to be able to see through the fog a little bit better 13 weeks from now towards December than I would in January. Mm-hmm. And so I might have some ideas. And so as long as my goal that I pick for this 12-week year, for this period, is directionally correct with that long-term vision, like I can have some ideas or like a repertoire of stuff that I'm discerning that could be an annual goal, but it doesn't matter because we have to be great in the present moment. And so being great right now and being excellent right now, it actually doesn't matter what's on my calendar 6 months from now because it doesn't affect today, It might matter that I'd like to be in that direction mm-hmm. in that. And so I want to build to that, but so much could happen between now and then. The other one I really loved is this idea of accountability as ownership. And so we all talk about accountability, and I love that the book covers this, but accountability, like if you were my boss, might be that I might view it as a bad thing, right? Like I might be like kind of worried about how I'm measuring up.
Why would you think that me being your boss would be bad?
No, the accountability not might be as a bad thing. So it gets kind of a bad rap that accountability is someone else making me do something or asking me to do
Mm.
something, right? And so this holds you accountable notion. And so
Why do you think that we resist that?
I mean, I think where it's uncomfortable. I think that we don't like failing. Um, we don't like the imposition of others sometimes. But a slight different shift that the book has that I love is accountability as ownership. So I want to ask everyone, if you have a goal, you're the one owning the goal.
Yeah.
And so the shift here is like, no, if I do have a boss and this goal happens to it, I'm articulating what my goals are and I'm asking him to help me own my goal. Or like in the book, they have what's called a WHAM partner, a weekly accountability meeting partner.
Wow.
So 15-minute check-in, you've already written your plan, you kind of have your measurements in it, and you have some tactics that were due this week. You're just having a check-in with that person. And like that person, other than loving you, doesn't really have always a stake in the game of if your plan's successful or not. It doesn't affect them. But you've set up that system to hold yourself accountable to what you've already owned. So the shift is like,
Instead of the accountability.
instead of accountability as like
directly.
the thing, it's like I'm owning the success of this, and the accountability helps me own it. So it's a slightly different. Like if you're authoring this plan and it feels phony or fake, like then there's probably something to kind of tweak that hits your long-term vision to make sure you're owning it, and you feel confident in that. Any questions so far?
No, I'm trekking.
Okay.
James is like taking me through this. Like I haven't read the book. It's a pure. He's just bringing me along for the ride, so to speak. So I'm excited.
Okay. And so we'll talk into some at the end, like some of the best practices in their execution system and things like that. But rather than talk through it hypothetically, we thought it'd be kind of neat to just model it. Like Jayce has a goal that some of us might have in common. Let's just work on how to get started on your plan and how to write it.
Right. So the goal is to start a Bible study. More specifically, to start a Bible study that generates more Bible studies overall. Like the classic focus or spiritual multiplication goal overall. But we just thought that one would be a really simple one that we have a lot of experience in, that we can develop and like show how we can in a missional way use this way of thinking and planning to count the cost and do it well.
Awesome. So
James
why
is the
you
consultant, and I am the loser who needs a consultant. That's what's happening.
Or in this case, like I'm a friend who's done it, and we're thinking about being WHAM partners, and you're wanting me to kind of help you walk through it the first time.
I go to bed dreaming about being a WHAM partner. Like this, James, you have no idea how important this is to me, and have like this moment right here. Wham.
I love it.
I'm here.
So first off, like let's kind of back up a little bit. Aspirational vision. We haven't had a chance to write it or whatever, but tell me, like, why would starting a Bible study that's going to lead into starting several more, like, why is that important to you?
Yeah, it's important to me, coming from the Great Commission, right? That we are to go out into the world and baptize all nations in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like that's and being able to preach that gospel. It's really important to me from a like a personal standpoint. Like I got the opportunity to live in that way. That's like a pure missional, like even as my vocation, for a time while I was a missionary, and got to see all of the fruit and the lives that are changed, and that as a result of it. But when I really dial it back to like my why for something like that, is because nothing else matters ultimately more than that, than having that relationship, that personal relationship that Jesus Christ, that becomes that is a life-changing paradigm shift for a soul. And that life-changing paradigm shift ripples everywhere. And when that happens, just like people's purposes are fulfilled, and they get to, and like ultimately, right, like the goal is like heaven, but that's a little bit abstract. So just the idea of like purpose being fulfilled. And I was just, when I'm on mission, like I'm never happier, in a way. Like I love being in that specific space, making things happen. It's why I do what I do now.
So you're like, part of your vision for life is like, you want the people around you to experience the love of Christ like you have and be transformed by it.
Of course.
And that's really from that place is why you want to start up a Bible study that then in turn starts more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, guys. The reason why we spent that is like, I could want to start a Bible study because I want like community. And that's a good reason to start a Bible study. But it's very
probably
helpful.
one of the main ones why people
And
start
it's probably one of the main reasons why people join for sure too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the beautiful gift is that like you get to give them this vision that Christ set out for us in the process. And so
community in my wine, like community is like baked into that lifestyle a little bit.
So we didn't do it here, but like one of the first things after, maybe even before reading the book, honestly, like maybe you read the first section about the aspirational vision, but is to write that vision. Like actually spend the time, like maybe go into the chapel and just like ask God some of the existential questions, like think about some of the gifts you have, spend some time in gratitude, but like visualize that future state, like that, like these men or women in the parish that you want to have, like falling more deeply in love with Christ, like spend some time seeing that happen. Like, how's it feel to be there? Like use real words, like actually kind of visualize that. And like, what could it look like 5 years from now? Like if you were really focused on, things that felt like this goal that you're going to do now, like how could that feel? What, when you all get together and you have a big meal, like what's that look like? When time's over and we're in heaven seeing God face to face, like who are the people you see there, right? These people that might be a name on your list, but that kind of thing helps us so much when we're living out in the desolation of life, naturally or spiritually. And when you're going through goals, like the natural will inform the spiritual, like you'll find desolation when you're working through a plan that's tight for 12 weeks.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the plan is.
Yeah. There'll be a little bit of valley of
Bible
despair
study.
there. It could be a sales goal. It could be a weight loss goal. I mean, you'll find that point where it's tough.
So when people, because sometimes I've noticed this, like when we start talking about let's vision, let's think it through. People are like, oh my gosh, we're gonna make some core values, we're gonna make some goals, and then we're never gonna look at them again. And I think that sometimes we just don't understand exactly why we're doing what we're doing when it comes to getting that aspirational vision. Like this is something for you to look at when you're done. Or when the tank is running low, and
Frequently,
in these
daily,
desolation
weekly.
lows. Yeah.
I typically have the habit of wherever my plan lives, I also have the vision written. I don't know that this is in the book or anything, but your mind psychologically doesn't know the difference between experiencing something great or visualizing something great necessarily.
What do you mean?
So, or bad. So let's say I suffered some kind of trauma in my life and I am now anticipating something that's like the trauma. My brain kind of gets hijacked and doesn't overly know, like some of my reactions in my body and all that, don't overly know whether I'm experiencing the trauma again or I'm being triggered into the trauma again.
Oh, interesting.
And so similarly with gratitude, the reason why it's so powerful of a habit and why it's in so much of our prayer, why St. Ignatius would say if you spent an entire retreat in gratitude in the first step, it would be a retreat well lived, is because it's transformative. Like if I'm grateful for an experience, if I'm looking forward to something with hope, that's a part of God's plan for my life, me spending time there and being aware of it helps reframe my mind to look for those kinds of opportunities throughout my daily life.
Yeah, it's like that. I don't remember the exact study, but I know the story of they had like 100 different free throw shooters.
Right.
One sitting down, lounging about, thinking about making 100 free throws. And then guys who were just actually practicing the free throws. They both did that for an hour, and then they pit them against each other, and they obviously had to have like roughly similar skill level and whatnot. And the guys who sat there and thought about making the free throws did significantly better overall. Like they both had the core. Like you have to know what like the mechanic is, and like So they eliminate as many of those variables as possible, but like it's the same, like
Yeah.
in your brain, and sometimes even more powerful.
Well, and there's also like this reality too, like you will experience failure in this stuff, right? And we will be uncomfortable in it. And we're probably making resolutions around something that's not in our life currently because we just made a plan about achieving a goal. So the goal is future state anyway. And so we have to be preparing ourselves frequently for where we're going. And there's going to be turbulence and change in that process. And so if we're like not reminding ourselves of where we're going, it's a lot easier for old habits to be the predominating thought pattern um, than it would be for where you're going.
Yeah.
So a little aside, but it's very important. I would not skip that step. Like I would give that like your top rock on a day or a week, to your top priority to flesh out.
I was about to ask what a top rock was.
Yeah, sorry. Different. We won't go into that analogy, but your top priority. So I would ask you to kind of write your vision. You've shared some of it beautifully here, but the first thing I recommend when you step into writing your plan is you want to have the goal, of course. And so you've said the goal is to
start a Bible study that generates other Bible studies.
Okay. And so you want to have the goal, and then just like right away, just white paper any potential tactic. So like an action item you could take. And this is where the rubber meets the road a little bit. Like I could have that goal that I want to start Bible studies.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm really doing some of the most important work. Like I'm fleshing through all the different ideas, and I'm going to make decisions about them and write out a tactical plan that, and these tactics, some will be happening every week. Some will happen in some specific chronological order, but for now, just like list the things you could be doing to start this Bible study.
List the things that I could be doing. I could invite friends that I already have to the Bible study. I could go to my pastor and ask if he knows anybody that would like to be in a Bible study. I could go to or get it in the bulletin in my parish. I could give a mass announcement in my parish. Maybe there's a dad's group at my parish's school that I could throw an invite into the group me there. There I could start praying to the Lord to like bring these people to me and have them be begin working in their hearts and like make it obvious and pray for divine appointments from the Holy Spirit. Stop me when I've gone too long. We could my favorite way is just the old fashioned fishing way is just going and being in the back of Mass and like finding people who are of the, like maybe you're doing a dad study, maybe you're doing a young men's study, finding people of that match that constituency group and going and talking to them and meeting them.
Personal invite.
Yeah, personally inviting them, or at the very least, like maybe you don't know anybody, God forbid, in your parish are of that age, and you want to just start something, and so that's kind of like where you have to start is just go find them.
Yeah.
And meet them. So that's another thing that you can do. Or as a tactic, you could like say you haven't like been a missionary before or something like that. You could study like what does that look for? Like read a book, like read Making Missionary Disciples or Sherry Waddell and kind of get some theoretical perspective behind it. You could pray with pray Lectio Divina over my favorite Lectio Divina passage when it comes to like the start, like at the start of whenever it was like the start of a new year, is the passage where some of the disciples or the apostles meet Jesus for the first time, and then they immediately like go get their brother, or like I think Andrew gets Nathaniel. I think I'm terrible about remembering the names, just absolutely terrible. It's like the concepts stick though. And Andrew's like, you gots to, man. This is what it is. And Nathaniel's like, I don't know. I'll go. But just that immediacy of I have met Jesus and I know who he is, and him moving forward, like praying with that and being nourished by the Holy Spirit in that way, deciding what this Bible study is gonna do, like or like what your curriculum,
what you're going through, what the schedule looks like.
yeah, what your curriculum might be.
So Jayce has got a head full of tactics and a page full of tactics here. I'm going to pause you for a second
All right.
and ask like a scoping question. So we've got 12 weeks, right?
Right.
So outcome based, we're at the end of 12 weeks. Where are you? What's that future state look like at the end of 12 weeks? You've got a group of guys. Where are they?
Yeah, if we're starting from like
Zero.
From pure zero, my hope would that at the very least, that I've met enough guys, or I've met a lot of different guys that potentially could be called to be in this Bible study with me. Like, I'll put a random goal of like an ideal Bible study is like yourself plus 6 other people, like 7, like they've done studies or whatever. Don't ask me why. I just know that that's what they would say. For a small group, and it doesn't have to be like we say Bible study. Like, I just want to very quickly talk about this. We say Bible study. What we really mean is a group of people being vulnerable and discussing stuff that matters. Like, and the most important thing that matters is the Lord, but it could be anything else, family struggles, all of this, and a Bible study in and of itself is just a tool that like helps facilitate that specifically. But sometimes the word Bible study like means different things to different people, but that is what I mean.
Would it be fair to say that you're actually trying to create small groups where people come to know Christ?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And where they're inspired to create their own small group doing the same.
Yeah, I would agree.
So it's like a slight different definition. So for scoping, you're starting from ground zero. Do you think across your 12 weeks, you've got it started, or you think you've got it started and you kind of have the first part of getting them in motion, like the Bible study is happening in this 12-week period?
I think at the end of the first 12-week period, I would have the roster.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't put it too much on myself, like, because sometimes it can take a while, right? Like if you go and try to meet somebody new after every mass that you go to, if you only go to one mass a week, that's like 12 masses. So that means you would have to bat 50% on all of those invitations, and that's unrealistic. I would say. So maybe it's just like having to, like, I would set the goal of having met maybe more than just 12 people, maybe like had 30 like potential people that you could invite to the Bible study. Would be a metric that I would choose to grab. And that's something that, like, what's great about it is like it's a lead measure, right? Like you can control how many people you've met. And what I would also say about having met somebody is that if you had a good enough conversation with them, that you probably would have gotten their contact info as well, so that you can like reach out to them later on and invite them. So that's like probably a key metric behind what I mean when I say met, is that you have their contact information. So 30 guys contact information,
Okay. So by week, if I'm hearing you right, somewhere before week 12, you have launched half a dozen, the 8 guys into a Bible study where they get the vision that they're going to be starting one as well. Yeah. Is that what I understand?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you like, depending on it really, that's a kind of a nuance.
They might
thing.
not get the vision, but they're
they
the types of guys who could.
Yet. Yeah.
Is what you're launching some with a group of the types of guys who could. Okay.
Yeah.
I like this because I think it's reasonable, right? Like I think maybe if you weren't at ground zero and you already knew some people in the parish,
yeah, you could go faster.
You could maybe get the right team together and start and have kind of your first wave happening in the first 12 weeks. But I like what you're sharing here. And so is there a point in here in the 12 weeks where you're kind of warming it up at all? Is there like a tactic? Do you see like any benchmark along here of a certain tactic before you've launched the Bible study where you're not just in this invite mode?
Yeah, I would have wanted to have spent time intentionally with each of the guys that I'm hoping to invite to the Bible study or have invited to the Bible study. Like just being real and being friends with each other. So whether like depending on who that person is, like, there's been guys that I would, go and take disc golfing. There's guys that I would like play poker with, or go to a board game night with, or go to the movies with. Like it would depend on each individual, but building that friendship would be like a key thing. So, and out of you go from the 30 people that you've tried to meet, and you're like narrowing it down to your 6, so to speak. It tends to be just who's responding.
So would it be fair to say, like, perhaps like if we're thinking about our plan as having 12 weeks written out, like on a piece of paper here,
Yeah.
Could you see in week 11 or 12 you're having the first Bible study?
Yeah, if it goes really well, yeah.
And then what you just said is like maybe you have a strong relational connection with about 7. By what week are you trying to have that with? If you're gonna make is it like 8 to 10 somewhere in there?
8 to 10.
And I like that we're not nailing it down because we're kind of designing it. So that's sort of how I think about it, putting it in there in order. Okay, so those are, I feel like, 2 really big ones. Now, what sort of tactics are you doing? You've mentioned some, but based on where you want to be at 8 to 10, you have a strong connection with some, and you've spent time with them, met with all of them one-on-one, and you're inviting them and having the Bible study in 11 to 12. What are the best tactics of the ones you brainstormed that you're either doing one time or weekly to ensure that you actually have a chance at a relationship with some guys in your parish?
Yeah, I think maybe one that I didn't particularly mention as I was spitting them all out on the fly was like having conversations with them, like counting the conversations that you have with each of the guys that, like, imagine at this point, like say at 8 weeks, you have the guys that you think are going to be the guys that are going to join your Bible study. So taking it upon yourself, like, you know what, I want to have one conversation with each of these guys every week, so, setting aside the time of like, I'm going to call them on my way to work, or after I put the kids to bed, or after my wife goes to sleep, or my spouse, or whomever. That would be a key one of just like staying and being friends with this person, because, and we should discuss this as well as we're like thinking about all these like different metrics and goals and things that we're doing. The reason we're doing like that this is happening is because the Lord desires this, and for people to be a part of, to be invited into these small groups, because they're able to receive community, they're able to receive love, and all of these things, even though that there's like a goal behind it of like, hey, I hope that a bunch of these guys end up like leading their own Bible study. That doesn't negate the fact that the reason why we're desiring this is like love, like,
Yeah.
And like what is the eternal good. And the Lord will, like, real life happens, and they're like, I don't know of any Bible study that's like started and had 6 out of 6 go and start another Bible study within the next 12 weeks. Like that's probably an unrealistic.
That's a vacuum.
An unrealistic thing, but having half isn't unrealistic of the guys in that study. And people like, nothing is linear here. Like, but we're presenting a linear picture, but a lot of our, like, these journeys, like, these are real people, real thoughts. And the devil doesn't like what we're doing with this. So it's ultimately messy and unlinear. But this is just kind of like, we're designing a plan which like tends to stick towards ideals. So I just want to like make that super clear that even if these things aren't hit, like we experience, like you said before, we're going to experience failure in all of it.
Yep.
And not hurting yourself, or like getting angry with yourself, or getting too discouraged when you receive that failure, because that's just part of the game.
Yeah, and since we're talking about like a spiritual goal in some sense, like there's the reality that like we're collaborating with God, and the Holy Spirit's the agent of evangelization. So like we're just trying to order our own nature to give him the most room to work his grace, and he'll work beyond this. But that happens in natural goals too. Like there's a quote from 12-step programs that says, without God we can't, and without us he won't. And so God loves us enough to like honor that we have agency and free will, and he wants to collaborate with us. Like he wants to do this
Right.
with
Yeah.
us. And so like, this isn't like, oh, I'm this super evangelist, perfect Bible study maker person. It's just you being prudent with the time you have.
Yeah.
Cause like, I'm actually assuming since you have a different full-time job, like you don't have like 40 hours a week to devote to this
Not even
goal,
close.
right? And so like, I would actually ask you like, so if you're having 6 meaningful conversations a week, maybe, at least week 0, at least week 1 through 8, you're doing that. Like, when are you having those conversations?
Yeah, you'd have to pick that time. Like for me,
Yeah.
like 9 o'clock and after is like, if someone wants to get a hold of me, I tend to be the least busy 9 o'clock and after. Like Danielle is normally starting to simmer down for bed. I'm a bit more of a night owl. My son is asleep. Like unless we're doing date night or something like that more intentionally, I tend to be extremely available.
So, he's specific there. And so one little tip on writing a tactic is you want to start it with a verb because it's an action item, a verb, and you want to be specific, right? So I think you would say, make X calls, yielding 6 meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
In the evenings, so you're like kind of specific about when that happens. And so that would be your tactic. And then measurement's a big part of the plan. And a lot of people don't like this because it could feel phony. Again, like we're talking about people and relationships with this. And so it could feel phony. But the reason why we measure is like, you have to be able to be honest and consistent about what God's asked you to do. And so if God's placed me in a secular job to earn a living for my family, like I have to be honest and consistent about showing up to that job and doing the best part of it. If I'm spending my time and talent on something that God's called me to, like I should be honest about doing it.
Yeah, you should be just as honest in that space.
Right. And similarly, like even more importantly, like if I have this great burning desire for people to know God, like I've gotten to know him and be transformed by him, like wouldn't I want to have a sense if like I'm bearing fruit with the talents he gave me? Or like if it's not really working and I'm kind of seeing that in my how I'm measuring myself.
Sure.
I should have the freedom to shift, to change. And so it's not like I'm not measuring myself so I can beat myself up. It's just like a mirror of how this is going. It's a looking glass on how the plan's working. So I would think you'd probably put that one and your meaningful conversations and your meaningful one-on-one time, like as a matrix you're sort of tracking.
Yeah. Another one of those like key goals from the things that I stated before is that the prayer has to be there at the beginning, right? Like it's just the way evangelization works is that you can't give what you don't have. And if the Lord isn't pouring into you and if you aren't consistently making yourself available to the Lord for him to pour into you, like your ability to pour it for it to have that his pouring into you overflow, is just it makes it very, very difficult. And I've had moments in my life where I've, prayed more, prayed less, and it always makes it more difficult. It's just the way that it is. So like praying, like having like that personal prayer for yourself as like the leader, but also intentionally praying for the guys whose names that you're writing down.
So how if that's not a habit of yours, or it's a habit you're wanting to restart, like what's a specific way in the season of your life that you can make sure you're doing that every week? Like how would you write that tactic to just be very specific?
Yeah, I mean, so in the way that you just said it, so in the goal setting, in the morning probably would be for me at 7:30, I will pray for 30 minutes and make sure that a piece of that prayer is intercessory for potential Bible study guys.
So maybe pray at 7:30 a.m. for the men that might be in my Bible study.
Yeah. I
like that. Earlier, when I was looking at your list, you had like do it together as a thing, and you kind of asterisk it. What all could be involved just to branch off that? Because like through the communal life is you kind of asked because it's important.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of things could you do with the men that you're meeting? Like, you haven't started the Bible study, but what are some ideas? And do you want to make any one of those a tactic?
Yeah, you could start, like, say you have 2 out of the 6, that have said yes to the Bible study at this point. You could go to a particular mass, every week, and make that something that you guys do together, like a morning mass or something like that, or there's just a particular activity that you guys are interested in. You could work out together. You could go watch the Thunder game together, watch OU football together. There's a million different community things based on what you guys have a shared interest in. But really, it's just all about focusing in and honing in on what that friendship can look like, and building that and having real conversations with them, and then doing it together piece, and then even like just like some of the ideas, like when you're asking those guys into the Bible study, of like depending on whether or not you think that they would be excited to hear or are ready to hear, the invitation to, I hope that you would lead a Bible study as well someday. And that's partially why we're doing this, is because this is what the Lord has asked us to do. But we'll do it together. And like, you can cast the vision for what together and that looks like. And so instead of it, like, remember back when I was the one hanging out in the church narthex like a creeper, like looking around for who's there. Well, now we're both going to do that together.
I like how you're thinking about that, because like you have a sense of the vision and what seed you're planting right now so that this is directionally correct. Do you think you would have that as a measurement, or do you think you'd have that as a tactic of vision casting, like making sure there's a moment where you vision casted before you start? Or
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like this moment of like depending, gosh, discipleship's so annoying. Like it's so non-linear in this particular way. Like there could be like, because I would imagine like the vast majority of the time, like, because like a lot of times it's a great practice is to make sure that the gospel is presented to a particular person where they have, because as Catholics we've been terrible about this for years, and man, we've talked about the gospel a lot on this podcast, but having this moment where you get to say yes or no to whether or not you want to follow Jesus Christ is a basic right that we all should have, and the guys in your Bible study should have. They can look different for different people, but sometimes maybe you have a guy who has had that happen to him before, and you've asked him into the study, so you can, before that actual conversation happens, maybe you're already talking to him a little bit about some of that vision casting beforehand. But there's probably a lot of guys that vision casting doesn't happen until later, because, and the reason why it doesn't happen until later is because someone has to have met and known Jesus to be really excited for the right way to see that vision, and to like, because otherwise it's vanity, right? I want to lead this Bible study because I'm a part of this group of guys who are all leading Bible studies, and I'm popular because I lead Bible studies with these guys. It can so quickly get easily twisted and into our egos and all of this stuff, and we have to be really careful of that. So there's just this, we have to prioritize like our relationship with the Lord, and encouraging them in that way too. Otherwise we're doing things for the wrong reasons.
Can I take a stab at just like a guess based on what you just said? Like I heard you say, like, I don't necessarily want to like vision cast the future for everyone, because some person might be seeking and they haven't met Jesus really. And so I'm answering a question they haven't asked. Mm-hmm. What if like weeks 7 through 10, like you've picked a number of like amount of men you're inviting per week to come to this Bible study that you're starting on the 11th week or something. And you're sharing the gospel with them in that, or a high call, or some sort of vision cast.
Yeah, that there's one of those three, depending on
kind of where they are.
Yeah.
And so it's clear what the Bible study is for, because I think you're being really beautifully intentional about that.
It's almost like being clear about asking or having a conversation that drives wherever we are forward.
Yes. Yeah.
is like kind of like, so you could call it like a forward movement conversation based
Yeah.
on where they're at, and that allows you, like, I like that, because if you just say by week 17 I want to have preached the gospel to or week 7 I want to have preached the gospel to everybody, like,
It's going to be different.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I love the
It gives you
idea of
freedom.
what you can measure, or like the overall topic you can measure is like a conversation that like is an invitation forward
Yeah.
in whatever way that is.
Yeah. And that could be the metric
Yeah.
that you're tagging, like the invitation forward that you're tracking. I love that. And I'm switching into like friend and fellow disciple maker for a second out of here because I love the topic. Like, you probably have other men that like are doing this somewhere or could like be with you, or you could pull in some way. Like, what if before you move into invite, you have this intentional time in prayer with anyone you've been talking to that gets it? Like, it's like, yeah, I want to do a study. Like, it's already happened.
Yeah, do it.
And
together.
like,
hey, I'm fixing to invite this guy.
like, I'm going to invite a bunch of people this like week. Like, here's these guys I'm praying over. Like, would you come spend an hour and pray with me? So you're grabbing like probably your Peter, James, and Johns, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like a good brother, like that you're already close with.
When we say Peter, James, and John's, we're referencing that Jesus spent the most time with Peter, James, and John.
Right. Yeah.
Just so that we all know that.
Yeah. There's he kind of had the 3 and then the 12, the 72, the 5,000, you know, there's these degrees he spent time. But like, do you think like a time of like set aside intercessory that the Holy Spirit move in the lives of the men you're about to invite and you're doing that with others, but you don't know who that is yet because you might not have met the man, but you're doing it with some guys that are
100%. That's an amazing idea.
Okay, cool. So we've written down a few tactics. One thing by process of elimination, we didn't mention some, but I think it's worth saying, like, which aren't you going to do? Like, can you just list on there and just look at it like, I'm not going to put energy towards this tactic.
I am not going to make a mass announcement.
Okay, and why?
Because it doesn't work. Okay, I have a story
Okay.
of more specifically why it doesn't work. First is, and I think I've talked about this particular study. I think it might have been within Atomic Habits. I don't remember. But the basic principle is when something is everyone's job, or when something is asked of everyone, less people respond. Overall, like if you invite 100 people to help you move, and they all know that you asked 100 other people to help you move, they're not feeling the urgency or the sincerity, or it's just not communicating the value of what you're fixing to do with them. And the same thing happens if you make a mass announcement to something relational at your parish. Like they're like, well, I might not do that. So like personal invites is just always better. Like it's not necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's still like a nice step.
It's going to be harder for you to get from mass announcement to meaningful one-on-one with the guy.
Yeah,
right?
Like they that means they have to contact you.
But also, you don't work at the parish,
right?
Right, and they're not there outside of this Sunday time. So if you're giving the mass announcement, you might not be able to organically meet a guy.
And maybe you're not going to get the space in the mass announcement. Like no one likes mass announcements. You know, everyone's checked out anyway.
So there's just time and energy you'd have to allocate towards that. You're not allocating. Anything else you'd cut off?
Not particularly interested. I can't read my handwriting. This isn't or so one thing that like maybe throwing a message in like the dad's group or at your school or something. It's the same thing, right? Like when you ask a large amount of people to do a very specific thing, like it just doesn't make sense. It's not the same deal.
Yeah.
So anything that's along those lines, I'm not particularly interested in. So those would probably be the two biggest ones out of all of these that I'm the least interested in making start.
What I want to give you freedom to do as you finish this, because we've kind of like chunked it in. We've got some things where we think it's going to happen week 1 through whatever, or week 7 through 10, or week 11 through 12, and some ideas on weekly ones. Kind of put that in, and like hold it for a day, think about it. You know, wake up, pray, review the vision. And let's pretend you're in week 13, so you're kind of in planning mode. Look at this again. Like, do you have any other thoughts or inspirations? Think about your calendar, your constraints. Like, is there anything here that you want to make adjustments to?
Can I go back to that
Yeah.
story though
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm
about the
sorry.
mass announcements?
Yeah.
Right. So this is a story from when I had just gotten here,
Yeah.
like after my time with Focus, right? So I was living in kind of the War Acres area. I was going to church at St. Charles Borromeo, and I'd met one other guy that I knew from college that was like, "Hey, let's get some community, let's get some small group stuff going." I'm like, "Heck yeah, I've been doing that for a living for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Let's do it." Um, it was like, "Oh, don't even worry about it. We'll have a group in like 3 weeks. I know Father Lucian really well. We'll make a mass announcement, and we'll get it going. Let's talk about the specifics of like what Bible study we're gonna do and all this stuff." And in the moment, like I was like, I don't know how, like I didn't know how effective that it was, of whether or not it was going to be that effective, but like he seemed really eager, so I was ready to do it. And so we make the mass announcements, goes through, and I try to um, like have my head on a swivel and talk to a few dads. The most brutal part about like talking to people after mass is when they're not even from your parish, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is perfect for our Bible study." And he's like, "Oh, I don't go here. I was just here on a one-off week. Sorry." um, so I tried to do a little bit of that, but was figuring out how to do that in the context of family life and having a 1-year-old who's like, "I want to get out of here now." So those were some new constraints for me. So for the most part, I just wanted to see if this would work. So we did that. We made a sign up list online. We put it in a QR code, put it in the bulletin, made it look good, all of that stuff. And so we made the announcements. And then I think we had one person out of the entire parish sign up. One. Throughout the entirety of the thing. So it was the tagline was like Young Dad's Bible Study. That's what we were doing. And so we ended up having this Bible study at my friend's house. And we had it all. We had a little bit of whiskey, we had a little bit of music on, we had the whole environment ready to go, and we were excited, and the guy came, and everything. But when the guy came, the guy was not young, and he wasn't a dad either. Like as I was trying to have this conversation and get to know this guy, I was like, yeah. How many kids do you have? And he's like, "Oh, I don't have any kids. I have 2 dogs." I was like, "Oh, wild." And then like as I was trying to keep the conversation flowing, and I was like, "How did you get married?" And he was like, "I met my wife. I met my wife on an online dating site." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Yeah, I was married before." And it was just like the most brutal conversation I've ever had. And it was really difficult because we didn't know this guy at any point before he just walked into the confines of his home. So there was just there's no warming up. There's no, so we were
It'd be
just
hard
diving in.
if your goal was to have a Bible study at lunch Bible studies to that be the feeder
Yeah,
trough,
right,
the
right,
feeding
right.
trough you're trying to pull out of.
And so it ended up being just the most awkward Bible study that we've ever had. We tried to get through it, and eventually he was like, "All right, I'm out of here." Um, and then once he walked out, me and my friend, we just both fell on the couch. We were like, "That was a mistake in every sense of the word." So from that point onward, I just really felt burned by it. With small groups specifically. There's great things like inviting everyone to the parish picnic. Great. Those are certain things, but that's a very different ask, right? Not a intimate thing. Everybody's there thing. So yeah, it's brutal. Just it's not going to be as fruitful as you think it is.
And I'm
You're
glad
going to be way more fruitful if you talk to one. If you just make it a goal. This is what I would do if I were actively trying to launch a Bible study in my parish. I would sit in the back, and normally I pray for a few minutes after Mass is over. I would save that for a little bit later, and later on, maybe 30 minutes after Mass, and priest gets by me. Maybe we're in the second verse of the song. I'm standing up and getting out there, and then. And during Mass, my head's even on a swivel of who potentially would be a great person to just strike up a conversation with. "Hi, I'm Jayce. Your family looks awesome. Tell me what's your name. And just starting the conversation there. If you do that one time for every mass that you go to, you'll be
Mm-hmm.
within 12 weeks, a million times more successful
Yeah.
than if you just like threw a mass announcement.
I know a guy who has a young kid, and he's at that age like I am, where you're always standing, like half the mass you're standing in the back because your kid's a little restless or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just is dealing the cards he's dealt, and so he's already out there when people are walking out. And so he meets them.
Yeah, hey, what's
And
up?
like the first time the person like kind of ghosted him, said no, a particular one. The next time, it was like a short little conversation. The third time they had a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and you're
then-
gonna have people who like won't even look you in the eye, and it's the
And
gosh,
then they ended up trading numbers, getting
you feel
together,
like a panhandler.
got a beer
Yeah,
together, said, hey, I'm starting a Bible study. Like it's almost what your plan looks like. See, like towards the end of the season, hey, I'm starting a Bible study. Like, I think you should come. And now that guy's leading a Bible study with a good chunk of other guys and preaching the gospel, and is like sold out. And so it went from, not, to your point, it was literally the progression, not looking in the eyes, not wanting to have a human conversation, to sold out.
yeah. How are we doing? Again, I don't know where we are in the 12-step planning process when it comes to this, and we're running lower on
So
time.
we kind of modeled it. We have a sketch of the plan, So I think look at it against your calendar, get a feel for it, think about it. And over the course of the next week, you're going to kind of try to hardline it. Like,
What does hardline mean?
really kind of nail it down. So you're thinking through different parts of it. Like, well, that's unreal. I'm not going to be able to invite X amount of people. Like, I just feel like I'm trying to be a salesman or something. Like, that's a little much. Like, let me be a little more realistic. Or the converse, like, well, I'm actually going to meet, if you had said I'm going to try and talk to 7 guys and invite them, like, I would tell you that was probably a bad plan, right? Like, or you might, because like, well, what if, less than a third say yes? Like, well, then you don't have enough, right? So you're gonna like think logically about it and just review, and see what it looks like, and then probably update. One thing that's big on the measurements is ask yourself some critical questions about the measurements. So you and I went through this, and we won't bore everyone. I do want to attach this. Like, I think we'll flesh it out and attach it to the show notes. Like, it won't be that hard to include it, so we can see the full example of where we got to. But you had like 6 or 7 things you wanted to maybe measure. Like, that could get exhausting, measuring that many of them, of like, here's my count every week. So we might ask ourselves, like, what's the critical number? Yeah. So like, if I'm in sales, like asking for the sale or proposing the offers, that critical moment before a contract signed, like the top end lead of like the interaction I might want to measure that, but I for sure want to measure that critical moment, right? And so you can kind of think through what are the critical parts and dial that in. The other thing I would encourage is reading part 2 of the book and like skimming through it. Like, I reread it every time I write the plan almost, or at least like listen to it, because I'm an Audible guy. But a couple things. If I've fallen out of this habit, or I've never done it before, I put in week 1 that I'm going to ask my WHAM partner.
Wham.
I'm gonna ask my accountability partner to join me in this, and then I actually do it. I put week 1 through 12 meet with my accountability partner, because it's not a habit yet for me. So I want to actually use my first time I do the plan to help me install the system. So I'm like, kind of just wait, what are the parts of the system they had? And then the other is, one thing they talk about is the idea of like taking back control of your day. So like, you're actually going to have to make time for these things. Like, it's not in your habit of life already. So you need to kind of look at your calendar. Just like when you became a disciple with Jesus, you had to reorient your life. If you're being more missionary in this season, you're going to have to change some things. Or if I had a new strategic goal at work, like I have a current status quo that I'm living out of, I'm going to need to actually they talk about 2 things: a strategic block, which they recommend if you're doing some new plan, find 3 hours once per week that you can work on your plan, that you can be strategic about just these initiatives, not everything else in life, but just this part of it.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the idea of a buffer block. So if you're a working professional, or maybe you're a parish worker, and like this plan has to do with what you do, or like if you're a stay-at-home mom or something, there might be a time where you expect yourself to do nothing but sort through the things that came in that you have to do, and you actually give yourself permission to just get ordered. keeping score is huge. So I would like calendarize, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you've set aside a time for your weekly review. So weekly review is a beautiful habit, but where you're looking at your aspirational vision, looking at this plan, you don't need to be changing things every week, but you do want to be able to change. So let's say you had parish announcement on here in the first 2 weeks, it's like nothing's happening. You need to cancel that off of your every week goal thing if it was on there, right? Or let's say you realize like, man, for whatever reason, when I call in the evenings, no one answers. It's like, wow, I'm going to change that for this week and call people on my way to work or on my way home from work and just see if it changes, right? Like you're going to shift it up to see where it's fruitful. So you're going to kind of install some of those things as you work your first plan. I would think the only last part I would give is just a bit of an encouragement to be imbalanced.
What does that mean?
To like be intentionally imbalanced. So to realize like I can't do everything. And so what I mean by that is like you've made a decision for like a really intentional goal here about your life on mission. That probably, if you're going to do it really well, means there's certain things that you just need to choose not to do. And so like this is kind of ordered around a particular thing.
Yeah.
And so there's maybe some other things that won't get as much energy. And so ask yourself that question and know that that's okay. This is just 12 weeks. And you might look at your plan even, depending if you put more things on here, and take some off so that you can be imbalanced around the ones that work the best. So that's kind of the 12-week year in a nutshell.
Heck.
And we'll include a finished plan in the notes because I think it'd be pretty fun.
Perfect. Well, there you have it. This has been Red Dirt Catholics. I'm Jayce.
And I'm James.
We'll see you next time.